Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering. Here we have Matt on a green-white Stompy build versus Rude on Dragon. Both players tend to enjoy brewing, coming up with their own takes on archetypes or even creating their own archetypes. See Grief here, which I still think may end up being the best card for Modern Horizons too. I think the higher the power level of the format, the more powerful free spells are in Grief. We've already seen Unmask being good enough to play in Vintage. Grief may just be better in almost all situations. Of course, you can't grief yourself. A slight drawback, but there's so much upside in having a body associated with the card. And we may see that here now with Reanimation on Grief. No, actually grabbing the Displacer, interestingly enough. Eldrazi Displacer. I mean, I suppose if you want to assemble a contraption, you may be able to continually flicker out your own Grief. You can bring one of those back from the graveyard and just lock your opponent out. So Reanimate, grabbing the 3/3. Once Upon a Time for Matt. And now a Chalice at 1, and that's going to stop all of these 1-mana spells, the Reanimates, Dark Rituals. Animate Dead now, hitting Grief. Second duress effect of the match in as many turns. Already 5 power on board. Another Eldrazi Displacer is taken, and you kind of have to. You're already committed to this path. Displacer really mess up the stealing creature route here. Under its owner's control means that that Displacer that was previously stolen take a journey back to Matt's side of the board, if only it can be flickered for a moment with a fellow Displacer. Chalice of the Void. Really the backbone of any of these decks called Stompy. Typically it means creature beatdown along with Chalice of the Void. Also the presence of those soul lands. And a Stoneforge Mystic for Matt. Threatens to swing this in the other direction. Stoneforge, of course, can bring in Cauldron Complete. Oh, but Collective Brutality escalates and takes out the Squire. So 1/2 for 2. Not so impressive if it can't summon some mighty equipment to battle. Of course, the downside of getting a card like Cauldron Complete or Batterskull, it's a little tough to get that into play without the Stoneforge itself, and that's what we see here. 5 damage a turn. Oh, and that's actually going to be it. Matt not going to be able to pull his way out of that game facing down that clock as Collective Brutality cinches it. That's a really interesting card in this build. Collective Brutality gives additional discard while also being able to handle the board. Now, previous builds of Dragon may have run cards like Faithless Looting, which, while it is faster at only 1 mana, and it does get more cards into the graveyard and draws you cards, ultimately that's not necessarily where this deck wants to be. As we've seen, this list has already put up some excellent results, top 8ing the Leaving a Legacy Open, and putting in some good work in our in-house events here on Wednesdays and Fridays. A very, very competent room. A lot of friendly players, but the level of competition and skill is very high. Of course, we do have new players joining in all the time as well. But overall, any given match, you could be facing off against somebody that's played on the Pro Tour or won an SCG championship, won a Grand Prix. I mean, we have a lot of seasoned players coming out every week and supporting the store. And of course, we always appreciate them coming out. We also have our online events, which has players from all over the world. Be getting those cameras working again. I've missed doing the coverage for the webcam events over the last couple of months. We've had some technical difficulties with that, but the events are still running. So if you're fan of the channel, a fan of the store, and want to play, but you're not within driving distance, we are still doing those Wednesdays and Fridays, 6:45 Eastern. And there's actually bonus prize support through the rest of the year. He has donated some boxes of Modern Horizons too, so the value cannot be beaten. Like, I mean, not really too thrilled with his hand here. No, but he is keeping it. Once Upon a Time. Able to dig. Really an interesting card. Able to find a land or a creature and potentially let you cheat on lands a little bit. Oh, and look at this. We've got a Thalia off of Elvish Spirit Guide. That extra acceleration gonna really hinder Rodney. Now, it's not as bad as a Storm deck necessarily, but it is still pretty hurtful. And now, got a Rotting Regisaur, a huge 7/6. No trample, though. See if this is actually good enough. Ooh, and immediately Solitude takes out the big dinosaur. That is not where you want to be. Of course, Solitude not hurt by Thalia as it is a creature. That card has just a ton of versatility. But another Rotting Regisaur does stick, dwarfing the rest of the board for now. Matt have an answer? Like Rotting Regisaur, forcing the discard Gyreach Sanitarium on board as well. And Collective Brutality is going to escalate, pitching a Lotus Petal. Brutality just so interesting. A lot of versatility. You're going after the hand or the board or even your opponent's life total, which can become relevant when you're trying to win with damage like Rotting Regisaur. There's a Saga for Stompy. Probably, I mean, it's going to be a big problem. I'll be able to trade with this Regisaur if there's enough time. We've already got a Mox Diamond on board. Likely expect a construct to be made here. And a construct the following turn plus tutoring. I mean, that handles this Regisaur as is. Brewed in a tough spot. Kind of all in on this Dino plan, but it's just not a particularly good plan. Really need to catch your opponent with like no creature removal. Having that first one cracked by the Solitude, really hurtful. Fire Reach Sanitarium. Back in play. Potentially allow for drawing. Another Collective Brutality. This one takes out Thalia. Oh, and it looks like... Was Matt low enough that he had to chump block there? Is that what we just saw? That may be the case. I believe Matt had to chump block. Now he grabs a Tormod's Crypt. Adds a Wasteland. Which you got to imagine is going to take out this Gyreach before too much damage is done. Thalia left on board. Matt needs to defend against a combo finish, but also there's a very real dinosaur. Looks like he's one shot away from death from that as well. Tanking here. Plays an Eldrazi Displacer. And just not quite enough mana really utilize that. It's just a straight up chump blocker here. Once Upon a Time goes digging. Let's find anything helpful here. Just trying to stay alive. Look like a Solitude. I guess that's exactly where you want to be. Solitude takes it out. Looks like Rude with just a single card in hand. Another loot. Unmask goes to the bin, not particularly harmful there. Matt has seen enough of that Gaia Reach Sanitarium. Thanks. Don't want. See 2 cards drawn per turn by this opposing combo deck. Reef pitching Gristlebrand takes out that Cauldron Complete that the Stoneforge found. What a bitterly contested game here. Once Upon a Time, off the top, digs, finds another Solitude. Stoneforge swings and looks like another Once Upon a Time. Not ideal, but they could be a lot worse top decks. Eldrazi Displacer. That's a pretty strong card here, as it'll be able to flicker the Stoneforge. Getting another equipment. I'll also... Oh, is there a white source? Or a colorless source? No colorless source right now for Displacer. Mox Diamond Plains. And a Swept Heath, not going to be able to fetch anything. There we go. That's a colorless source. Tomb. Solitude flashes in. Is this going to be lethal? Even if it's not, Solitude can be flickered out with this Eldrazi Displacer. Repeatedly, we've got a Chalice of the Void at 2. Like Rude responding with an Entomb. And a second Entomb. So Gristlebrand and Worldgorger in the bin. I think Displacer shuts down all of this. I'm not really sure what line can be drawn to here. This is just going to be lethal. Very soon. Yeah, that's going to do it. So one huge swing followed up by another. All of Rodney's life is taken from him there as we're on to the next game. But that was a bitterly contested battle. This is going to be the tough one, though. Up against a combo deck on the draw with a deck that doesn't have much to say on turn 1 is always a scary spot. If you can weather the storm, you may be okay, but Unmask feeds out. Solitude at least gives you something to do on that first turn. I guess historically it was straight 0 options, but Solitude does introduce free spells to these white archetypes. Death and Taxes, Stompy, type of white aggro decks can now have access to additional copies of Swords to Plowshares. Only saving the 1 mana. Builds that are going to best use it are going to get extra utility out of that body, like with Eldrazi Displacer, as we've seen. Losing that Gristlebrand off the bat, perhaps. So has Entomb for another one. The extra Gristlebrand not really useful. Happy to pitch that to an Unmask or a Collective Brutality. Piranha Marsh. During the battlefield tapped. Does make for a full mix with Worldgorger Dragon, but it is a garbage magic card, let there be no mistake. Sometimes end up playing some janky cards because of their synergy with other parts of your deck, but that is not something that you're generally happy about. Unmask, pitching unmask. Probably not going to take the ESG. Does grab that Solitude, but, you know, facing down Thalia here. Elvish Spirit Guide and Stoneforge Mystic, so the hand is empty. Headed to the board, got 5 damage on board. I mean, that's a 4-turn clock. Cauldron complete if it does manage to stay in hand for this next turn. We'll be able to be put into the battlefield with Stoneforge Mystic, and Rodney's going to be left with just a couple of turns left. Here we go. Cauldron complete. It's going to be 9 damage coming in. I think this might be it right now. Yeah, that is it. Yeah, 9 plus 9 plus the earlier damage. Just that one draw step, not a big enough window, as this green-white Stompy shares enough DNA with Death and Taxes to continue to have an awesome matchup versus Reanimator, it would seem.